everyone. Welcome to Adventures Through the Mind. I am your host, as always, James W. Jesso. This podcast is brought to you by listeners like you via Patreon. The people whose names are listed on the screen here on YouTube and are listed in the show notes to this episode are people who have been giving generously, some of which for a very long time. So a big thank you to them, but generally a thank you to my patrons as a whole community that basically allow this podcast to continue, not just for themselves, but for you too, if you are not a patron. So big thanks, patrons. If you're not a patron and you're enjoying the show, or you're going to watch this episode and afterwards be like, wow, this is great. How can I support this person? Well, you can head to patreon.com/James W. Jesso, and you could support me there, and it would be great. I appreciate you doing so. People who pledge $8 or more get access to an exclusive Dropbox folder that has a bunch of content, some of which has been released, but is otherwise you need to pay for, that you get as being a part of the Dropbox. Some of which is unreleased. For example, the Q&A from my recent talk that I just released on 9/20 called Psilocybin and Connection is available for people there, as well as downloads of the video and the audio, which is not available otherwise. As well as a download of my talk that I gave in Edinburgh this August, which is a talk that I am continuing to tour around the world doing about bad trips, but is otherwise not available unless you are A, a patron and you're getting it through the Dropbox folder, or B, you come to check me out. So if you want to become a patron and you want to go $8 plus to get access to that stuff, that'd be awesome. Alternatively, you could leave me a PayPal donation of any size. Anything is something, so big thanks. And you can do that by heading to jameswjesso.com/support. More options there, like stuff from the store. All of it's awesome. Links are also in the show notes to this episode, wherever you're catching it. So big thank you for doing that. Really appreciate it. Yay. All right. So going into today's episode, which is a bit of a different one, you're probably noticing the audio quality in the intro here is a little bit different than normally, a little bit lighter, less sort of like vocal boost. It's not as full. Well, I'm recording it with the same microphone that I used to record the variety of interviews that are present in this episode. Like episode 100, where I traveled around OZORA Festival in Hungary, getting interviews with people, asking them all the same 3 questions, I did something similar at Breaking Convention. If you're watching this on video, you see the Breaking Convention shirt I'm wearing, and if you are watching it on video, you saw the cool little cutscenes of all the happy people at Breaking Convention that I made for the video version of this podcast. And I went around asking people 3 questions, different ones from episode 100, and got some pretty cool answers. And so I'm using this mic for the audio to be a little bit more consistently not great because I'm a small-time character, just got a small camera, small mic, just doing my best to get some stuff for you guys to enjoy, for y'all to enjoy. So the questions. The 3 questions that I asked were, what is the most relevant consideration you are holding at this conference? Which is a bit convoluted, thinking about it in hindsight. But essentially what I was asking is like, what's churning in your mind? Maybe it's why you're here, what you're most curious about insofar as psychedelic culture, something that you just watched or listened to that really stuck with you. What's salient? What's hanging around? What are you really thinking about? And the second question was, what do you see as your role in the psychedelic renaissance? Which in hindsight kind of feels lame, because like that whole psychedelic renaissance, it feels like a lame, like it's exciting what's happening, but the term feels like basically a lame PR campaign. But generally it was a question of like, what do you feel you're doing here? Like, what is this thing and what is your role? State your purpose. And so got some cool answers there. Now the third question was sort of weird because I changed it. Okay. So initially it was, what, if any, role do you see psychedelics playing in helping humanity face the current ecological crisis? Now, I changed that because I noticed that I was basically inviting people to have a positive response to that question, how psychedelics can be positive. And after one person answered it with well, maybe it's not positive. Maybe there's nothing positive about this. Maybe it's not the type of positivity we think it's going to be. I decided that, I wanted to include at the end of it, this doesn't have to be a positive message. And then additionally, after several, people that I interviewed, I realized that the ecological crisis, though incredibly important, is not the only crisis we're in. We're in political crises. We're in mental health crises, physical health crises. Here in Canada, we have a opioid drug contamination crisis. There's just like authoritarian crises. There's migrant crisis. There's just a lot going on. So then the question became, what, if any? The question became, what, if any, role can psychedelics play in any of the many crises that we are facing? Now, as you listen, I'll tell you the structure of the questions in a second, or how the videos unfold. I'm not differentiating between when I asked who, what version of the third question, because it all seems pretty seamless anyways. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Just enjoy. The structure of the episode here is that there are 4 blocks, and in each block, every person I interviewed speaks. And in the first block, they introduce themselves, and then the second block, they do the first question, third block, second question, fourth block, third question, and then the outro, which is a block, but I do the outro. So that is how everything's structured. It's fun doing this kind of thing. Doing it at OZORA was cool. It takes a lot of time, and as you'll hear, it can be very difficult to find a stable audio environment to get nice audio. But it is a lot of fun, because when we're at conferences like this, in my experience, what ends up happening is that all these people are getting together and they're sharing ideas, and they're hearing other people's ideas, and they're just interacting and socializing. And it's like it's one giant mind where periodically waves of insight emerge and and roll through everybody and manifest in different ways. And there's lots of interesting stuff to be harvested there. And of course, harvested afterwards through integration, as if, the conference is its own psychedelic experience, which there may or may not have been psychedelic experiences. So I find that interesting, and I'm hoping to do it some more as I travel around to get this kind of content for y'all, the enjoyers of adventures through the mind. Quite possibly doing something similar at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference in Vancouver at the beginning of November, which I'm just going to take a second to talk about before we get into the interviews here in a second. There's some stuff there about Australia as well, so don't jump ahead. Don't skip this. You still there? Okay, good. So I'm going to Australia shortly, in a couple weeks from now, about 3 weeks from now. And I'll be there for a short amount of time. I'm going to be giving some talks, Brisbane, Sunny Coast, Sydney, as well as at the Rebel Herbal Conference. And also, I'll be in Melbourne, but I don't know if I'll be giving a talk there. Nothing's organized. If you're an organizer in Melbourne, you want to have me, hit me up. But if you're in Australia and want to come see me do my thing, it's very rare that I'm in Australia, given how far away it is. And it's going to be increasingly rare as I'm choosing to fly less and less in respect to the ecological reality of flying, the carbon footprint. So come check me out if you can. Details are at jameswjesso.com/events. Also, if you're following my adventures to my Facebook page, I just added all those events to that page. Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, I'll be in Vancouver for that. I'll be speaking, very excited. I'll be speaking about bad trips, and I would love for you to come. Spirit Plant Medicine Conference is one of my favorite conferences that I've been to, and as you know, I speak very highly of it and the people that they have, that they curate for speaking, and I feel really grateful to be included. And if you follow jameswjesso.com/SPMC, Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, SPMC, it'll take you through an affiliate link where you can buy tickets and I'll earn a small commission, which I'd really appreciate. But commission or not, if you're going to be there, looking forward to seeing you, and come up and say hi, please. So those are the details. The last little block of details. Here are the interviews, my harvests from Breaking Convention Conference, which happened in August of 2019 in London, England. Enjoy.
Yeah, hello. My name is Rita Kocharova. I'm a psychologist and researcher working at the National Institute of Mental Health in Czech Republic. I'm involved in the psychedelic research for almost 10 years already. I have studied psilocybin, ayahuasca, also the secretion from the bufalvarius toad, and currently lead researcher of the project which seeks to create a proposal of the system of the services for the psychedelic users in the Czech Republic.
So I'm John Anderson. I'm a researcher, but I've recently transitioned to therapy work. So my research was in first episode psychosis, and also I did some work on that for a study, but my primary study was studying hallucination-like experiences in healthy adults with Ganzfeld technology, which is a particular type of light flicker that if you look at it, it can induce visual hallucinations in some people.
Hi, my name is Akwiya Ofosuhene. I'm a psychedelic fashion designer and co-founder of Hub and Culture Shop, which is an African and Caribbean collective shop.
Yeah, hi, I'm Toby, and I work with Iboga. I'm an Iboga activist. We try to heal drug addicts, but we also make some case studies with Parkinson patients and try to implement Iboga and the use of Ibogaine in a more broader scale and make it possibly recognized by health professionals in the German-speaking realm.
So my name is Chiara Baldini. I do a few things. So one of them is the curator of the Liminal Village, which is the cultural area of Boom Festival in Portugal. So I curate the cultural program of the festival. And I also do independent research on the evolution of the cult of ecstasy in the West. So I research, in a way, the lineage of European indigenous shamanism, especially in the time of ancient Greek and Roman times. And I'm a DJ clandestina.
My name is Martin Scherp. I am an entrepreneur. I currently run Synthesis, which is a legal psilocybin retreat in the Netherlands.
So I am Maria Papaspirou, and I work as a therapist in private practice in Brighton. I work as a family systemic constellator in Brighton in private practice. And in my work, I do a lot of psychedelic integration work with people. Sometimes people that have come because they're interested in integrating their experiences, sometimes because the experience has been difficult, challenging, and sometimes traumatic.
So doing it up there, definitely. You don't mind?
Yeah, I will go ahead and begin. Why not?
My name is Tom Hatzis. I am a psychedelic historian. I write about psychedelic history and run the psychedelic harm reduction and education group Sanctum Psychedelia in Portland, Oregon. With my partner, did I say that? I can never remember, sorry. My partner reading, in case I didn't say it was amazing.
I am Sena Orshi, and I am a yoga and mind coach. I teach Asian African yoga, and I help people to become better versions of themselves using yoga and meditation.
So I'm Leo Roseman. I'm a neuroscientist in Imperial College London. So I did a master's and a PhD in the lab of Robin Carter-Harris and David Nutt, doing a lot of neuroscience work. And now I'm doing my postdoc over there, working also on how psychedelics can promote reconciliation. So learning about this interaction more in group work of Israelis and Palestinians.
I'm Sam Gandhi. I have a PhD in ecological science. I have a master's previous to that in entomology, and I'm kind of an extracurricular psychedelic researcher as well. So I collaborate with the Imperial College Psychedelic Research Group, and my principal interest is the ability of psychedelics to connect us to nature and the implications this has for individual well-being, but also pro-environmental behavior.
So to my mind comes now the last panel discussion and the talk I have heard about the Extinction Rebellion founder and the connection of the psychedelics and the ecological crisis and how psychedelics could catalyze some societal change. So I think that was a really important topic, and that was something I was really looking forward to. And anyway, I'm also interested in the connection of the shamanism and the technologies and how those sections can intersect, as well with the clinical psychedelic studies and the psychedelic therapy.
Okay, so I suppose it's not just one thing. There's a number of things that I'm thinking about at the moment. First of those things would be safety, awareness around safety, particularly as people become more aware in the wider culture of psychedelics, minded to try them, even though they're still illegal to use in the UK outside of research contexts. Second thing would be the dialogue that scientists are having, and in particular within the UK, the way that a lot of it is being steered by the Imperial Group, and they do a lot of excellent work, but I also feel that there are many other voices within the science and wider psychedelic community which are being left out of the dialogue, and I think that's a bit of a shame. And I think that I'd like to see that change going forwards. So for example, a lot of the work done in Imperial, which is excellent work, but it's very steered towards a kind of more materialistic interpretation of things, which seems to be discordant with a lot of people's experiences on various psychedelic compounds. So I think that we have to have more of a wider inquiry within these things, within science. And Andrew Gilmore is one example of that, where that started to change. But I think that needs to be much wider and kind of encompass a wider range of people. And the third thing for me is a rise in health inequality in respect to the possible medical use of psilocybin in the future in the UK, and how people with bipolar spectrum disorders are being left out of that. We're not part of any clinical trial. There's no plans to do any clinical trials with people like that, and I should say that I have bipolar myself. And that's a real shame because I think these compounds do, with the right support, and I do think there needs to be tailored support for particular categories of people, such as myself, then a lot of people can benefit, and we are some of the most vulnerable populations that would benefit the most, because the suicide rates amongst people with bipolar, and in particular anxiety-related bipolar, are very disturbingly high. So those are my three main things that I've been thinking about whilst I've been here.
Gosh, that's quite a big question. I think the most relevant consideration I'm holding, I think actually just to be part of Darren's event really was very important to me, to really come and do a good job and really help extend representation at Breaking Convention. So yeah, I think just being part of Darren's event was really the most important thing for me.
What I really like is the integration of the psychedelics on a broader scale, and not just making it a nerdy psychedelic thing, but thinking of how to integrate psychedelics on a broader scale and how to make it accessible and usable for a broader audience, not just for the really psychedelic heads and nerds, which is getting more and more to a point, actually.
Well, I am looking for potential speakers for Boom Festival, so I'm trying to see which topics can be relevant for young people that come to festivals. And I also look at the presentations that bring together the social and political relevance of psychedelics. Also, the role of women in psychedelic history is one of my main topics of interest, because also I'm just publishing now, so just came out now this anthology that I co-curated on psychedelics. It's called Psychedelic Mysteries of the Feminine. And so there's quite some talks this year on women and psychedelics, which is very refreshing, finally, and I'm following those. And I'm also trying to see this connection between psychedelic culture and eco-activism, and holding, like, I have a consideration inside that I'm really trying to figure out what's the point of trying to survive on this planet if that is going to worsen the point that we are actually overpopulating the planet. So saving us is only going to worsen our situation in a very paradoxical sense. So I'm holding that paradox inside at the moment.
The most relevant consideration is how to scale the psychedelic experience safely, effectively, to reach the most people possible. And that means really thinking about all the things that can go wrong and building the proper infrastructure for the future that prevents going in the wrong direction, which means building the proper medical protocols, the ethical protocols in a for-profit system.
So I think what's happening collectively at the moment is at the forefront for me of everything I engage with. So what's happening on a socio-political level, the splits that are quite amplified in our society, the general anxiety that's around, and what's happening on an environmental level, what's happening generally on a collective level that seems to be getting towards a point where we're going to need to gather resources and solutions that work better than the ones we have employed so far. So I think the thing that really stays with me as I hear the talks is firstly how aware the psychedelic community is at the moment of the need for change and the need for new resources and the need for new ideas that can mobilize resources we already have but aren't quite aware of or aren't quite using. But how vital the psychedelic community is in providing answers that are not yet out there because of the access it has to dormant potential humanity has at this point and needs to start using.
Erica Dyke just spoke, and her detective work on the role of women in the early LSD tests during the 1950s was just, it's why I became a historian. It was just, I just love that detective work. I love people going in there and digging out the truth as best as they can, and she nailed it.
The more you think you not know stuff and the more you learn about things, the more you see there is to learn and there is to grow and to evolve. So I think knowing is growing, is creating, is the purpose.
So I guess coming to the conference is about maintaining connection with the community, both hearing other people, kind of listening to try to find new things, new ideas, and also kind of maybe teaching something of what I can from the community. So kind of transmission of knowledge, I guess, or just connection with people. Yeah.
Well, it might be a little bit of an abstract answer, but I would definitely go with connection, the theme of connection. Not only in like the research that's being discussed and I'm interested in as well, but much of my time here personally has been spent connecting with people and reconnecting with people, and that's sort of what's one of the fundamental things I really get from being part of this community and coming to this conference is that, and the things that those connections then set in motion. So yeah, that's what I would have to say.
I have different positions in the current psychedelic renaissance. So I'm active as a researcher. As well, I have founded a Beyond Psychedelics initiative. So we are doing the conferences and other events and providing education and destigmatization. and I'm also for my self-exploration, visiting different shamanic traditional cultures all over the world. And I feel that maybe this situation that I'm involved in different areas of the psychedelic renaissance makes me to be a kind of connector of those different areas, and how we all can collaborate and learn from each other for the benefits of all conscious living beings.
Okay, well, my thoughts on that have changed quite a lot. I started off thinking that maybe my contribution could be primarily through research, but the sad fact of the matter is that the research environment is quite a challenging one for people with a disability, in particular mental health related issues. And I've experienced that myself, unfortunately, sometimes. So I came to the point of thinking that I wanted something more. And also, it should be said that my own psilocybin experience fundamentally reorientated my view of the world and how much I thought I knew about the brain and actually didn't. And I discovered through that process that actually what was most important to me was helping and supporting other people to grow and develop. From that point of view, I would consider now that my role in the future would be more defined by psychedelic integration work. Having done my own integration work for over a 12-month, I think I've got something valuable to offer for that.
I suppose really my own journey with psychedelics has revealed to me that, I don't know, I'm starting to find a way to try and help white people to challenge white supremacy. And for me, that's really important, because I've grown up at a time when it just seemed to be that actually white supremacy was a non-white problem. But with the help of psychedelics, I can actually help white people to find the language to be able to stand up against white supremacy and hopefully bring this whole system to an end.
We have the problem with ibogaine that we are able to detox heroin addicts rather quick and painless, and they have very deep insights about their karmic entanglements and about the causality of their addictions. But when they come out of this treatment, they often have problems of being stigmatized as being crazy or psychotic, because they might have talked to their dead grandparents, or they have this psychedelic insight. And when they come to their normal, officially accredited drug counselor, these drug counselors say you are crazy, you took a hallucinogenic drug, and now you think you have some insights about your addiction and about the karmic entanglements of this addiction. So making these drug counselors more aware of integrating this treatment modality and to make it accepted by these drug counselors is one of our main issues lately. So there is a study in Brazil where people who taken ibogaine once and then being brought back right in the environment where they live their addiction have a much higher relapse rate than people who have taken ibogaine and then being in a safe environment where people are understanding and compassionate about what is happening in the ibogaine treatment, and then having a second ibogaine treatment after 2 months have a much less or much decreased rate of relapse than people who have just done one ibogaine treatment without an integrative phase. So having drug counselors and people who understand what is happening in the psychedelic journey, helping these people to integrate this is very crucial. So we are a network of people worldwide who try to brief the counselors on making this treatment modality a bit more available on a broader scale.
It's a big question. I don't have a definitive answer, but for sure I try to bring culture to the youth that go to festivals. So yeah, I'm a mediator in a way and a world bridger. I visit different tribes and different cultural scenes and try to get the information that they hold that can be relevant for the youth of today. And that's already a big one. And in a way, also my role, I see that it's turning into a world bridger between different festival scenes and club scenes that are also overlapping with psychedelic culture, and to see how we can create alliances and collaborations and synergies so that our work and the knowledge that we carry can be of most efficient use, again, for the youth of today, but also for the broader public.
My role in the psychedelic renaissance is to pioneer a for-profit model that ethically gives access on scale. So to add to that, really bringing some of the most competent players in the space together to combine research, protocol development, in a way that really honors the psychedelic experience. And that means developing the right investment strategies, thinking about sales and marketing, educational the public, regulation, checks and balances in the space, which is very important, and thinking about the market forces that will change all the verticals in this industry. And I don't think we have had a really proper conversation around that, and there's a lot of capital moving into the space. And so I feel my responsibility and our responsibility as Synthesis is to really develop the golden standard and the best example how to do it.
I have no clue. I work as a therapist, and I think my work is trying to support people integrate. And I think integration isn't just for psychedelic substances, psychedelic experiences. I think any inner work, any psychological work is essentially integration work. I think as a community we need to be reflecting on how we do things and where we're at. And we're going to need to be integrating our own collective, our own shadow that is coming up in various ways. So with the resources and skills and knowledge base I have, I think what I can offer is reflection and the potential for integrating what's unprocessed within our community. That reflects and resonates with what's unprocessed in the wider community. So integration on various levels, I think, is what's needed if we are to move from the collective trauma space that keeps us limited and depletes us rather than reinvigorates us and helps us move at the capacity and the necessity that's being called for at the moment.
Hopefully bringing historical truth to people, for those that are interested in knowing about our lineages, our psychedelic lineages, especially in America. There are certain groups, like the Native American Church, that are allowed to use peyote because they've shown a historical lineage. So it's now under religious freedom for them, our First Amendment. So I feel like if we can show a historical lineage of psychedelics throughout Western civilization, maybe that will help to expedite the legalization process for everyone today, or decriminalize, or wherever it's going. As long as they're not illegal anymore, that's what we're going for.
I think speaking up about my experiences, even though there are many taboos where I come from, considering my culture, considering my religion. But that's the whole point. I want to speak up about it and share my experiences and knowledge around it and help people to, to make a way for them to also speak up and to open up their minds to try new things and consider different ways of self-development.
I guess I like expanding things. It's a bit like a role of there's a trickstery element there. There's a bit of role of a smartass, but I think wherever I will be, I would like to do not the obvious. So I guess that's the role that I'm playing right now. So if the movement goes to medicalization, I'm trying to do something a bit else. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, I'm only playing a small part, I think, in this, in terms of it's an extracurricular kind of research interest of mine, or a hobby on the side. But there's not many people in the psychedelic research arena talking about the whole nature connecting aspect of psychedelics, and which I find interesting. Like, obviously there are a few people who are interested in it, but it's something I feel is like very important indeed, and is very interesting and very important given our current ecological situation, our increasing disconnection from nature and interpersonal disconnection, and psychedelics can play a role in remedying this disconnection and by reconnecting on broad levels. So I want to try and keep moving forward with the nature connection aspect of psychedelics. Like, one's degree of nature connection is of fundamental importance for psychological health, lower anxiety, increased life satisfaction, meaning, vitality, happiness, high psychological functioning at the trait and state level. So for the individual, nature connection is very important. It's a big predictor of overall psychological health, but also it is the single strongest psychological predictor of pro-environmental behavior. So I see any means of increasing this in humans as like a win-win, both for the individual and the biosphere at large, like, especially given the fact we're in a 6th mass extinction event of life on this planet right now. So we need, it's all hands on deck in terms of, like, we've not got much time to try and, like, steer a different course. And as a quote I think attributed to Albert Einstein, we're not going to fix a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. And this is where I think psychedelics can be helpful. They can give us a broader, more comprehensive overview of our place in the bigger system and reconnect us to nature. So this is very important, and although it's a side interest currently now of the psychedelic research field, I think it's fully worthy of being perhaps made the central focus. And I think Albert Hofmann took that view as well. Like, looking back at the end of his life, he came to feel that LSD's ability to connect us to nature was perhaps its most important and fundamental quality, which I concur with, I think.
So seems like that what psychedelics provide is this sense of connectedness with other human beings, with the nature, with basically our environment. I believe that it's through the experience of unity, which we can experience when taking psychedelics, and I think that's the underlying common mechanism of action. How psychedelics work to treat different kind of mental health disorders, as well as improving our relationship to the nature. So helping us to protect the nature just by the simple sense of that we all are one, that we all are connected, that we cannot harm anyone or anything without harming ourselves. And I believe that might be one of the mechanism of action of the psychedelics, how they can help us to make the humanity sustainable in the context of the ecological crisis.
I think they have a role to play, but I think we have to be very careful. By connecting those two things so directly, we run the risk of providing yet another reason why the powers that be should continue their war on drugs, and in particular block access to psilocybin-related treatments, because those powers that be fear change at the end of the day. On the other hand, I think that on an individual level, they can help us to think much more closely about our connection to the world around us, nature, and in particular our actions in that respect. So speaking of myself personally, I've become much more ecologically aware since my psilocybin experience, to the extent which that has started to filter through into my everyday world, the way I conduct things. So I try to recycle as much as I possibly can, but I also recognize that it's pretty much impossible to leave a carbon zero life in our modern way of life. I try to do where I can, and I think psilocybin has been part of my awareness, growing awareness in that. I think fundamentally it's not a solution in and of itself. I think a lot of it will really depend on how people are able to sit with difficult emotions around their impact of their lifestyle on the environment and what they want to do about that, but also about how we integrate those changes into our life in a much wider context to help drive change. Because I think psychedelics on their own, whilst they might provide us with a window of opportunity to see things from a different perspective, won't, without those factors, lead to lasting change. And that's a tragic thing for all of us, because we think of ourselves as such an intelligent species, but what species is that intelligent that it decides to destroy itself and every other living thing on the planet by acting in the way that it does? That doesn't suggest to me that we're actually that intelligent after all. And I hope that we can change as a species from that.
For me, psychedelics kind of like represents... well, it's part of nature deciding to engage with us. That's how I see psychedelics, and it seems to me we reached a crisis point where the planet itself decided, if we don't jump in, these human beings are going to destroy everything. And psychedelics is really, for me, that one element of nature that's reaching out to humanity. And through psychedelics, I actually think if people can really do the hard work, then we really have a chance of ending all of it. Because I think we start to think about deforestation, child poverty, all of these, but they're all one. And like I was saying, it's the one umbrella over the whole thing is this kind of extractive capitalism system that we're under, and it's got this racialized element, and then we call it, as a shorthand, we call it white supremacy, but actually most white people are under it as well. So really, psychedelics is, I think, the only means that we've really got for people to kind of let go of their ego, let go of the titles that they've been given, so that we can actually just end the system. And that's it. That's it for me. Don't split it all up. It's one thing. We get rid of it all one time. Done.
So I feel that people who broaden their awareness and kind of zoom out of their personal issues with the help of psychedelics often get a bit of the bigger picture and understand how their lifestyle affects a whole variety, like a domino effect, on all other living beings. And by being aware of this, or sharpen the awareness, or raising the awareness of their ecological impact, people often start thinking about how to live a better life, not just for myself, but also for the complex, for the bigger picture, for the unity of all beings. So people tend, especially with ibogaine or with ayahuasca, people tend to think more ecological about their nutrition. How am I feeding myself? How can I eat without impacting the climate change? How can I live in a way which is not just good for me, but also good for all sentient beings on this planet? And this is definitely often induced by psychedelic experience.
So I see two things mainly. One thing is psychedelics can be a tool that is, if it's well used, it can help to heal trauma. And I think this is one of the main things that we need to do. It's our big job in order to shift into a new phase of evolution. So heal trauma on one side, and on the other side, reconnect to nature. you will never look at a tree in the same way again after you have looked at it in an altered state. So, or you will never look at nature again after you've seen it breathing in front of you. So I really hope, since this is another very important thing that needs to happen if we want to enter the next phase of evolution, I hope that these two are the main benefits that psychedelics can bring. Right. There's many more, but these are like the first two big ones that come to my mind. Everybody wants to be in service of life, but we also need to be in service of death. We cannot be in service of life without being in service of death. And we need to be in service of what needs to live and what needs to die. It's part of the same cycle. So this is my paradox and, yeah, like deeper inquiry. Because we are fast to jump on this train that we want to save the planet, we want to save humanity on the planet. But what does that actually mean? Also biologically, how can we really survive if we are so many trillions of people? So yeah, let's see. Yeah, this is a big conversation.
I think almost any crisis, but personally I'm most interested in two things. One is multi-generational trauma, just because that's something I experienced myself, and psychedelics delivered a path of healing that I don't think I would have found otherwise, or it would have taken a long time. And so in a way I credit my well-being in my life and a lot of other my relationships and some of my friends to the psychedelic medicines that we have. Additionally, I wrote my philosophy thesis on the ecological crisis, which I think is fundamentally crisis of the other, of realizing that we have a world that we share with other beings and creating compassion and empathy around that, but also understanding that we cannot survive being fully disconnected from them. And that's been a fundamental insight in my personal life and also in the research that we've been doing.
Psychedelic experiences can play a huge role. I think psychedelics in and of themselves can create awakenings that can come and go as if nothing has happened. I think psychedelic experiences that are properly processed and used as maps for how to live better and how to relate better to self, others, world, the environment, those that need our care and attention in this world. I think psychedelic experiences can have an enormous input and impact. They really help us question things, they help us see things from different perspectives. They really catalyze our imagination and our creativity, which can move us towards better resources. But they awaken. I heard Andy Letcher's talk. He talked about the ecological self, and I think these experiences awaken and invigorate the ecological self. They help us understand we're part of a systemic consciousness, and they help us understand that nature isn't something out there we have to defend and fight for. Nature is in here, and we have to defend and fight for both. We have become separated from the natural world, its riches, and its difficulties and challenges. And by doing so, I think we've lost a lot of ourselves on the way. So psychedelics can awaken the wider sense of self that's systemic. It's got the ecological consciousness within. And if we operate from there, then we can only operate in line with ways that will support the environment around us. We have forgotten a lot. I think there's a great forgetting that has taken place. And psychedelic experiences help the remembering. They help stitch things back together so we can act not as if we're separate, but as we're part of the same intelligence, the same ecosystem. And every action isn't just going out there, but goes straight back in there. So if we can cultivate this greater awareness of interconnectedness, which I think psychedelic experiences really support, and I think feminine consciousness really support, then I think we can retrieve really significant resources for the challenges we have to navigate, the changes in the challenges we have to navigate. So there's something, I'm talking in my talk about matching visionary poetics with decisive action. We have to use these creative and visceral experiences and put them to good use to the everyday life and the everyday world. So yeah, they have a huge role to play, as long as they're processed and used in a way that supports that function, rather than used defensively, that can cut that function off just as much.
I guess then I would say that in the era of social media solipsism, caring about others and the planet is actually degrading quite a bit, and it might actually get to the point where it doesn't matter how many mushrooms you eat, you're just kind of a pretty self-centered individual, and that's just embedded in you. I know in the 60s there was the belief, especially by the Leary group, that you could use LSD to change behavior, and I'm not so sure that that's true. I mean, there's definitely something to say about the insights you get into your own self, and provided you integrate those lessons, yeah, something can happen, but we've all, I'm pretty sure, given up the idea of the magic bullet, psychedelic magic bullet years ago.
Whew, yeah, good that you added that, because everything has two sides. I think, at least the way I will be promoting it, and I think that sure is an effect and will be more of an effect, it can help in self-exploration and self-healing and in self-empowerment. And I think, if you look at ancient times, many knowledge comes out of it. And I think we just need to remember that same knowledge and continue building on that.
I'm not sure. Definitely by being a lot with the psychedelic community, my own experiences, the people around me, there's definitely a certain energy which I believe which is healthy, and I believe it's not just in a kind of illusion or a bubble that we live in. And I guess that the spread of it, if done right, would bring a healthy living. So healthy is people are better to each other, better to the land, have a certain spiritual connection, a community, connection to nature. All of these things, I believe, can be, whenever there's a big enough movement, can be quite healthy for humanity at large and the future of humanity. Yeah, but of course, lots of caveats, and it's not just like give everybody psychedelics and you heal the world. There's like a lot of things that we need to respect in this tradition, the psychedelic tradition, and kind of maintain them in order for it to be a real transformation. Yeah.
So what the research is telling us that's interesting is that a single or a few psychedelic experiences, even in clinical nature-deprived settings, can catalyze this enduring long-term increase in nature-relatedness or connection. And this is the single strongest predictor of pro-environmental behavior. Now, this is important because right now we have an intellectual understanding, we have the knowledge to know we're in an ecological crisis, that we're in a mass extinction event, and yet possessing that knowledge it's not being sufficient enough to motivate action on the scale necessary to have a positive effect. So if we've got the knowledge and yet aren't acting on it, then I see like perhaps our only hope is some level of mind change, consciousness change, perspective change. We need that. That's going to be, I think, the route to actually drive this big systems change. So I see psychedelics as being useful catalysts for that. I think the emergence of the environmental movement during the 60s at a time of widespread psychedelic usage was not a coincidence, and I think the research findings that are coming out now are sort of showing it was likely that usage of psychedelics helped catalyze that environmental movement. The modern Extinction Rebellion movement was partly inspired and based on psychedelic insights. So we need quite a radical. We've got a lot to do in not much time, so we need a kind of radical shift in how we're interconnected with nature and these larger systems. We know from indigenous groups, some who use psychedelics, not all of them, that they live incredibly nature connected existence. And there was this big IPBES report published that found there was a very comprehensive assessment of our ecological global situation. It found that species extinction, ecological degradation is accelerating and unprecedented as any time in history. And we're basically without a full global mobilization on the scale of World War II to face the ecological crisis. We're in deep, deep trouble. But the few places on Earth that weren't being degraded ecologically were lands inhabited by indigenous people, and those people live very nature-connected lives. And when you're that connected to nature, you see it as an extension of you and you being a part of it. And why would you damage an extension of you? It makes no sense. So one of the major drawbacks of our materialistic civilization is that we've inadvertently severed our connection to nature to a large degree, which has big implications for us as individuals, but also our ability and care and concern for protecting and preserving it.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you didn't, I'm sorry. I did my best. What do you want from me? I just sounded like Rick and Morty. Okay, anyways, if you didn't like it, I'm sorry. Let me know why so I can learn from your criticisms. If they're constructed, I'll keep them in mind. If they're just you being an a-hole, I'll probably have some sassy, salty comment to respond to you with. If you did like it, love for you to share it with your friends in some way or another, or support the show financially by leaving a one-time PayPal donation or by becoming my patron on Patreon. Like I had mentioned, if you do $8 plus, which you don't have to, you can very easily and very nicely do something much lower. But if you do $8 plus, you get access to an exclusive Dropbox folder with a bunch of content, which other people otherwise have to pay for individually, or stuff that's just basically not available to anyone else. So go check that out. Those options are contained in the links in the show notes to this episode, or you can go to jameswjesso.com/support for those details. Again, I will be in Australia during October. Details are on my events page, also linked below, or wherever this is, wherever the links are, which is close to wherever you're listening to this. And I'll be at the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference in Vancouver in November. Love to see you there. I'll be speaking. Buy tickets through jameswjesso.com/SPMC, or also in wherever the link is in the description to this episode, to help me earn a small commission on your purchase of a ticket. So yeah, cool. Thanks. And I will see you on the next episode of Adventures Through the Mind. Take care.